It is accepted for most fields of learning that motivation is essential to success, that we have to want to do something to succeed at it. Without such motivation, we will almost certainly fail to make the necessary effort. We need, therefore, to develop our understanding of motivation, of what it means, where it comes from, and how it can be sustained. First, let's define motivation. At its most basic level, motivation is some kind of internal drive which pushes someone to do things in order to achieve something. In his discussion of motivation, Douglas Brown includes the need for ego enhancement as a prime motivator. This is the need for the self to be known and to be approved by others. This presumably is what causes people to spend hours in the gym. So such a view of motivation also accounts for our need for exploration. Marion Williams and Robert Burden suggest that motivation is a state of cognitive arousal which provokes a decision to act, as a result of which there is sustained intellectual and/or physical effort, so that a person can achieve some previously set goal. They go on to point out that the strength of that motivation will depend on how much value the individual places on the outcome he or she wishes to achieve. Adults may have clearly defined or vague goals. Children's goals, on the other hand, are often more amorphous and less easy to describe, but they can still be very powerful. In discussions of motivation, an accepted distinction is made between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, that is, motivation which comes from outside, and one which comes from inside. Extrinsic motivation is the result of any number of outside factors. For example, the need to pass an exam, the hope of financial reward, or the possibility of future travel. Intrinsic motivation, by contrast, comes from within the individual. Thus, a person might be motivated by the enjoyment of the learning process itself or by a desire to make themselves feel better. Most researchers and methodologists have come to the view that intrinsic motivation produces better results than its extrinsic counterpart. Even where the original reason for taking up a language course, for example, is extrinsic, the chances of success will be greatly enhanced if the students come to love the learning process. So what are the external sources of motivation? The motivation that brings students to the task of learning English can be affected and influenced by the attitude of a number of people. It is worth considering what and who these are, since they form part of the environment from which the student engages with the learning process. First, we have the goal. So it's one of the strongest outside sources of motivation, in which students perceive themselves to be learning for. Frequently, this is provided by a forthcoming exam, and in this respect, it is no surprise to note that teachers often find their exam classes more committed than other groups who do not have something definite to work towards. However, students may have other less well-defined goals too, such as a general desire to be able to converse in English, to be able to use English to get a better job, or to understand English language websites. Some students, of course, may not have any real English learning goals at all. This is especially true for younger learners. In such situations, they may acquire their attitude to learning English from other sources. Next is the society we live in. Outside any classroom, there are attitudes to language learning and the English language in particular. How important is the learning of English considered to be in the society that the students live in? In a school situation, for example, is the language learning part of the curriculum of how high or low status? If school students were offered the choice of 2 languages to learn, which one would they choose and why? Are the cultural images associated with English positive or negative? So all these views of language learning will affect the student's attitude to the language being studied, and the nature and strength of this attitude will, in its turn, have a profound effect on the degree of motivation the student brings to class, and whether or not that motivation continues. Even where adult students have made their own decision to come to a class to study English, They will bring with them attitudes from the society they live in, developed over years, whether these attitudes are thoroughly positive or somewhat negative. We also have the people around us. In addition to the culture of the world around them, students' attitudes to language learning will be greatly influenced by the people who are close to them. The attitude of parents and older siblings will be crucial. Do they approve of language learning, for example, or do they think that maths and reading are what count, and clearly show that they are more concerned with those subjects than with the student's success in English? The attitude of a student's peers is also crucial. If they are critical of the subject or activity, a student may well lose any enthusiasm they once had for learning English. If peers are enthusiastic about learning English, however, there is a much greater chance that the same student may feel more motivated to learn the subject. We also have curiosity. We should not underestimate a student's natural curiosity. At the beginning of a term or semester, most students have at least a mild interest in who their new teacher is and what it will be like to be in his or her lessons. When students start English for the first time, most are interested to see what it is like. This initial motivation is precious. Without it, getting a class off the ground and building rapport will be that much more difficult. Even when teachers find themselves facing a class of motivated students, they cannot relax, for it is what happens next that really counts. Sustaining students' motivation is one area where we can make a real difference, and for that, we need a motivation angel. So what is the motivation angel? In the northeast of England, outside the city of Gateshead, stands a remarkable statue by Anthony Gormley, the 20-meter-high Angel of the North. It can be seen from the motorway, from the nearby train line, and for miles around. It is, by common consent, a work of uplifting beauty, and inspires almost all who see it, whatever their religion or even if they have none at all. So the Angel of the North provides us with a satisfying metaphor to deal with the greatest difficulty teachers face in terms of motivation. For, as Alan Rogers wrote many years ago, we forget that initial motivation to learn may be weak and die. Alternatively, it can be increased and directed into new channels. In other words, we can have a powerful effect on how or even whether students remain motivated after whatever initial enthusiasm they brought to the course has dissipated. We have the ability as well to gradually create motivation in students where initially there is none. This is not to say that it is a teacher's sole responsibility to build and nurture motivation. On the contrary, students need to play their part too. But insofar as we can have a positive effect, we need to be able to build our own motivation angel to keep students engaged and involved as lesson succeeds lesson, as week succeeds week. The angel needs to be built on the solid base of the extrinsic motivation which the students bring with them to class. And on this base, we will build our statue in 5 distinct stages. And what are those 5 stages? First, we have affect. Affect is concerned with students' feelings, and here we as teachers can have a dramatic effect. In the words of some 11-year-old students, a good teacher is someone who asks the people who don't always put their hands up, and a good teacher is someone who knows our names. In other words, students are far more likely to stay motivated over a period of time if they think that the teacher cares about them. This can be done by building good teacher-student rapport, which in turn is dependent on listening to students' views and attempts with respect and intervening in an appropriate and constructive way. When students feel that the teacher has little interest in them, or is unprepared to make the effort to treat them with consideration, they will have little incentive to remain motivated. When the teacher is caring and helpful, however, they are much more likely to retain an interest in what is going on. And as a result, their self-esteem, which is an important ingredient in success, is likely to be nurtured. Next is achievement. Nothing motivates like success. Nothing demotivates like continual failure. It is part of the teacher's art, therefore, to try to ensure that students are successful, because the longer their success continues, the more likely they are to stay motivated to learn. However, success without effort does not seem to be that motivating. If everything is just too easy, students are likely to lose their respect for the task of learning. The same is true if success is too difficult to attain. What students need to feel is a real sense of achievement, which has cost them something to acquire, but has not bankrupted them in the process. Part of a teacher's job, therefore, is to set an appropriate level of challenge for the students. This means setting tests that are not too difficult or too easy, and involving the students in learning tasks they can succeed in. It also means being able to guide students towards success by showing them how to get things right next time. The third stage is attitude. However nice teachers are, students are unlikely to follow them willingly unless they have confidence in their professional abilities. Students need to believe that we know what we are doing. This confidence in a teacher may start the moment we walk into the classroom for the first time because of the student's perception of our attitude to the job. Aspects such as the way we dress, where we stand, and the way we talk to the class all have a bearing here. Students also need to feel that we know about the subject we are teaching. Consciously or unconsciously, they need to feel that we are prepared to teach English in general, and that we are prepared to teach this lesson in particular. As we shall see, one of the chief reasons, but not the only one of course, why classes occasionally become undisciplined is because teachers do not have enough for the students to do, or seem not to be quite sure what to do next. When students have confidence in the teacher, they are likely to remain engaged with what is going on. If they lose that confidence, it becomes difficult for them to sustain the motivation they might have started with. Next, activities. Our students' motivation is far more likely to remain healthy if they are doing things they enjoy doing and which they can see the point of. Our choice of what we ask them to do has an important role, therefore, in their continuing engagement with the learning process. It sometimes seems to be suggested that students only enjoy activities which involve game-like communication and other interactive tasks. However, this is not necessarily the case. Different students, as we have seen earlier, have different styles and preferences. While some may want to sing songs and write poems, others might be much more motivated by concentrated language study and poring over reading texts. We need to try to match the activities we take into lessons with the students we are teaching. One way of doing this is to keep a constant eye on what they respond well to, and what they feel less engaged with. Only then can we be sure that the activities we take into class have at least a chance of helping to keep students engaged with the learning process. The last stage is agency. Agency is a term borrowed from social sciences. Here it is appropriated to mean something similar to the agent of a passive sentence. That is, in the words of some grammarians, the person or thing that does. A lot of the time in some classes, students have things done to them and as a result, risk of being passive recipients of whatever is being handed down. We should be equally interested, however, in things done by the students. When students have agency, they get to make some of the decisions about what is going on, and as a consequence, they take some responsibility for their learning. For example, we might allow students to tell us when and if they want to be corrected in a fluency activity, rather than always deciding ourselves when correction is appropriate and when it is not. We might have students tell us what words they find difficult to pronounce, rather than assuming they all have the same difficulties. J.J. Wilson suggests that wherever possible, students should be allowed to make decisions. He wants to give students ownership of class materials. letting them write on the board or control the CD player, for example. For Jenny Disonville, while the teacher may decide on broad learning outcomes, he or she should design tasks in which the students are empowered to take a more active role in the course design. For Leslie Painter, it was allowing students to choose what homework they wanted and needed to do that was the key to motivating her student to do the tasks that were set. Real agency occurs, finally, when students take responsibility for their own learning. And we can provoke them to do this in various ways. No one is suggesting that students should have complete control of what happens in lessons, but the more we empower them and give them agency, the more likely they are to stay motivated over a long period.